Welcome to the Sprint Backlog. Now let me ask you this question. How do you know what features should be developed in each sprint? Well, one way is to ask the neighbor Psychic. But instead of that, checking the sprint backlog is a more reliable method, okay? Upon completion of this lesson, you will understand the difference between the sprint and product backlog. You will know how to pull work into a sprint backlog, understand that the sprint goal is the commitment of the sprint backlog, and learn patterns to help the team complete the sprint backlog. Now let's get started. The sprint backlog is an ordered list of product backlog items that the team believes it can complete during the coming sprint, plus plan for delivering product increment for achieving sprint goal. These items are pulled from the top of the product backlog during the sprint planning meeting to achieve the sprint goal. Each story should have a point value assigned to it based on the estimate amount of relative effort it will take to complete the story. It is important that the team estimates in points, not in hours. The team determines how to best work through the sprint backlog. However, when possible, they should work on highest value items first. Once the team forecasts the number of stories they feel that they can accomplish in the sprint backlog, there should be no addition to change until the sprint ends. However, if the product owner decides there is a feature of higher business value that needs to come into sprint, the product owner should use the interruption procedure. If an interruption arises that so dramatically changes the priorities or scope of the sprint and cannot be dealt with as interruption, the product owner may abort the sprint. In this case, the team stops and the new sprint's planning meeting is held and the new sprint is started. This can be extremely disruptive to the team, so the product owner should be very leery of stopping mid-sprint. One note, experienced teams should use yesterday's weather to determine the number of points they should pull into the sprint. Now let's talk about yesterday's weather. Yesterday's weather is the Scrum pattern that helps team quickly calculate how many points they will likely complete in the upcoming sprint. The name comes from the fact that the best predictor of today's weather is yesterday's weather. In most cases, the number of points completed in the last sprint is the most reliable predictor of how many points will be completed in the next sprint. Here is how it works. So the team determines their average velocity for the past 3 sprints, adjusted for the team size. For example, if one person of 5-person team is on vacation for the entire sprint, in which 50 points of work is completed, the team raw velocity 50 should be divided by 80%, which is 4 instead of 5 team members, for a normalized velocity of 60 points. Normalized velocity is the number of points you would expect the team to complete if all team members are available full-time. During the next sprint planning, the team determines what the percent capacity will be for the upcoming sprint. If a fully staffed team has 5 members who all work full-time, but one team member will be absent for a day in the coming week-long sprint, the team capacity will be 96%. And finally, multiply the team's normalized velocity by its percent capacity for the coming sprint to determine the target points for the next sprint. This technique is quick, accurate, and if you are just starting with Scrum, please do not run a sprint without including this pattern. In the resource section, you will find yesterday's weather tool. It does all the math for you. Monitor sprint progress. At any point in sprint, the sum of all remaining work of the sprint backlog can be calculated. The developers track all remaining work at least at daily meetings and predict the likelihood of achieving the sprint goals. By keeping track of the rest of the work in the sprint, developers can manage its progress. Scrum does not consider the time spent on the sprint backlog. He only cares about remaining work and time variables. As the sprint backlog highlights a real-time picture of the work needed in a sprint, the developer has to regularly update it. Unnecessary elements from the sprint backlog are deleted, and the estimated remaining work is updated accordingly. So as you can see, we do not need comprehensive documentation. If someone is interested to see the remaining work, he can just look at the sprint board. Now let's see a sprint backlog example for 4-week sprint. So first, create a sticky-based sprint backlog and product backlog on the wall in the team room. Now set up servers for the product environment, including databases. Set up build server to build commits, run unit tests, and compile deployment packages. Set up distributed service bus. Before deploying to production, automatically back up the database. Set up an empty API that connects to any empty database. Before deploying to production, automatically run integration test on API. And create and deploy an empty Angular website that connects with the empty API to show the version of the deployment release. In the next lesson, we will see Scrum board demo. Now let's get started.